So, the big Elder Scrolls Online reveals for the year 2023 are here, and I've watched along with the Twitch streams and content SOS has put out as well. I don't want to spend a lot of time on a recap of everything that has been shown, because there are many other content creators giving nice overviews of this. I'll link some videos if you want to hear more opinions on that in the description. First of all, generally I too am excited about what's to come for 2023. I think the proposed changes to their content release sound good, and their new main feature, the Arcanist, is a breath of fresh air after several game systems that could be completely ignored in the previous years. I would like to focus a bit more on the PvP perspective here, which seems to be a rather niche part of the game these days, but it usually does get mentioned as one of the first things when ZOS presents the activities in ESO. It's definitely portrayed as one of the more endgame parts to get into, say on the same level as Trials, but it's equally presented on a beginner level with Battlegrounds or low level or no CP Cyrodiil as well. So it's safe to say I think that this is a core part of the game in the end. Not as much of a focus as in 2014, but still a core part. So that leaves me to wonder, where is this represented in the road plan for the past 4 years and now for this year as well? The last thing that was added for PvP was a Battleground map in 2019. To give a quick overview of what's to come in 2023, there's 2 dungeons in Quarter 1, 2 zones, a trial and a new Arcanist class for Quarter 2, bug fixes and quality of life stuff for Quarter 3, and essentially a special 3rd dungeon or endless arena in Quarter 4. The only significant thing here that can be considered extra content for PvP is a new class. That's literally it. There's the usual Battleground events that I suspect not many people care about, some new sets and rewards are worthy, but nothing in terms of mechanics, maps, systems, or anything really for yet another year. And when it comes to the Battleground events, they're nice to get new players notified and interested in PvP, but people who actively play ESO do not care much about the events at all. The rewards from the events are measly, and the event is essentially a limitation on content, not a temporary expansion in content or replayability, which is rather ironic. That's a stark contrast with the only other PvP event, Major Mayhem, which is a huge boost in those 2 aspects. Sometimes I think there might be a point to this almost complete disregard to PvP and new content. Perhaps it's that the player base shouldn't be spread out over more forms of content, so adding new maps or new systems like arenas would be undesirable. ZOS might have come to that conclusion based on the history with Battlegrounds, where queue options were changed several times with the mention that they don't want too many options, since that would spread out the PvP population for BGs too much. But then too you have other options of adding content, such as new systems in Cyrodiil or even better Imperial City, which are already populated by the PvP player base anyway. Or perhaps it's something that ZOS mentioned themselves as well, namely the work that they're doing on performance and finishing that first. But is that really something PvP specific to at this point? We know that new servers is what fixes these troubles in PCNA, and those are for the entire game, not just for PvP. And when it comes to Battlegrounds in Imperial City, these performance issues are way less impactful. Generally speaking, Cyrodiil is a pain point here, so for that specifically I do understand, but for the other 2 this shouldn't be a reason. There are no drawbacks in adding another map or another system to Battlegrounds. Neither is there a drawback in creating more incentives, and I mean actual PvP related incentives, such as something competitive like leaderboards or faction positions to Battlegrounds or IC, not just a fancy hat. It's not like there are not enough ideas going around either. To illustrate this, I want to mention ReactFaster here, an NA content creator who has been writing pages of text on the forums about many of these issues, to the point that I think he could release a book soon if this keeps going on. For instance, he has whole lists of ideas for Imperial City, which is a zone with so much potential, but remains in an undead state for most of the year for several years now. I definitely recommend checking it out and maybe giving it a bump, the link is in the description. In any case, you don't have to wait for better performance or worry about the player base spreading out on new maps here. Changes can be done to the existing content. And on the contrary of worrying, this could be a benefit because new things that happen, new systems, new content bring in new people, and that counts for PvP as well. This is just one example too with Imperial City here, because there are many others sharing constructive ideas and feedback that you can work with. But that gets me to another point, because the people I just mentioned are an example of the good part of the PvP community, and there are definitely a significant amount of rotten apples as well. Perhaps this is another reason PvP doesn't receive an update. Maybe it's not wished for to give a community that is not completely Care Bear and cheering for frogs and songs something to talk about, something that could make the community grow or become more vocal. Because I can definitely imagine from Zos's perspective that the role player, card player, quester and social communities are a lot easier to work with than the sometimes combative PvP community. But even then, the ESO PvP community is very tame compared to other more PvP focused games, and the rotten apples shouldn't be an excuse to ignore everything related to PvP. To return to my original point though, the PvP part of the game is basically left for dead. Players and content creators are tired of never seeing anything new, and while it's really good and motivating to see a new class in PvP, that too is just one thing and seems more like a side effect of the class being added to the entire game. It really shouldn't take that much effort to add a small battleground map or a leaderboard in IC or something more competitive like in Tales of Tributes into Cyrodiil, just to name a couple of things. In the end, even though the PvP player base is relatively small, it is creating activity in the game, it is producing content and it is bringing more people to ESO and especially helps keep them in ESO. That last part is becoming a bit more of a focus, I think, with the new content plan for 2023. PvP is also something you can and do use as advertising, but I'm afraid this won't last if all that happens to PvP is on minor things like sets and side effects from game changes such as new class additions. Don't get me wrong, these notes aside, I do like the new changes ESO is bringing to 2023. It took a long time, but it seems that finally a stronger focus on bug fixing and playability is coming, and the new class is a real breath of fresh air for those that love ESO's combat. Let's hope the execution of this roadmap will be better than what we've seen the past year as well.